55 is real. I'm David O'Brien, Braves writer for The Athletic. And we have a very special guest today with my co-host, of course, Eric O'Flaherty. Eric, what's up, man?
Not much. How you doing?
I'm good, dude. We got a timely guest today.
Yeah.
Joining us from right outside his office in sunny Newport Beach, we got Scott Boras. Scott, welcome. Welcome to the show.
David, Eric, it's a pleasure to be here. It's nice to talk baseball. I haven't been able to do that for a while.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, man. You ain't kidding. Hopefully we're talking a whole lot more baseball real soon. I wanted to ask you, Scott, before we get going, I know I just wanted to ask you just give your opinion on the state of the game in general, both financially and as far as its appeal, to the fans kind of in the bigger sports landscape. What do you think we are?
Well, we're the health of our game is tremendous. When you look at what an owner has availed to him today versus 20 years ago, you've got well over $100 million a year from a general fund. You've got MLB BAM that exists now. You've got franchise appreciation that is estimated to be at somewhere in the area of over $100 million a year for each franchise. You've got pretty much any owner who's been in the game for over 10 years is a billionaire. Mm-hmm. So this idea that we have small market owners that existed 20 years ago, it's kind of a different dynamic economically because they're all wealthy, successful, and each franchise has choices. It's not a question of if they can, it's what they choose to do that makes good business sense for them. We have a lot of owners that are using the equity in their franchises to build ancillary investment, real estate, entrepreneurial venues outside the stadium, which are off the books, if you will, so that they don't have to revenue share, but they can grow their businesses, which is smart for them to do. So the promise of the game, the attraction of the game, the economics of the game are really, really at the highest level it's ever been because there are so many investors that want to purchase these franchises. They want to buy in. The reason is that they do far better. All of the evaluators have indicated that you're going to get, something in the area of 60 something percent ahead of what the stock market gives if you get into these. Mm-hmm. So you're starting to see across the board in all sports, people invest in professional sports because the investment is just good business.
So did you do a spit take yesterday when the commissioner said that baseball owners do worse in owning a franchise than they would in the stock market?
Well, the evidence of that is unsupported by, again, he said he spoke to an investment banker, and I didn't mention his name, but I can only speak to and address this from the information we collect and the investment bankers, and also the evidence of the Cleveland Indians sold. To give you an idea, you saw 10% of Fenway Sports being sold. I get calls all the time from people who want to know who to contact to purchase these franchises. So it is something that you read articles about people who have owned hockey teams or basketball teams that are all doing very, very well. So if that is truly what the investment people are telling, Rob, I would say that there's probably opinion out there, but that would be a smaller part of the opinion of what I think the true nature of what advice most venture capitalists are receiving about professional sports franchises.
It's like guys can buy a team nowadays 10 years ago and sell, like you said, a minority share of it, still be the majority owners and make the money back that they put into it and still own the team to be the majority owners.
Well, I think the story of people investing anywhere from 200 or 300 million to 500 million, the truth of it is many of these people are only investing 90 to 100 million. Mm-hmm. They're getting financing because their banking entities know it's a good investment. So they got to invest a small amount of money, and then they got to take advantage of monstrous appreciation over the last 10 or 15 years.
What if you could point to one thing out of the last collective bargaining agreement that maybe hurt the game or hurt from the players' perspective, what would you say it was? What more than anything were they looking forward to having another CBA to do to rectify?
Eric, you can probably go back to this from your playing days. I know I can mine. Is that I don't think a lot of people really understood what the draft means to these major league teams. Right. And in 2011, when they allowed to put a cap on the draft, I heard general managers say things 2 weeks before of what they're going to do, and then completely alter their program once they got the rules and understood what was available to them. And that was sell off your free agents. It's a race to the bottom so I can get all these valued draft picks and get as many as I can. And it gave the fan base a method of illustrating that losing was okay. Yeah. It was actually beneficial. If we're not going to win, let's lose. And what I think when you introduce that cancer, that non-competitive cancer into the sport, you've now created that the local fan does not go to the ballpark with the intent of having his team win every day. And I think we have to reintroduce that into our game. We have to make sure that competitiveness and going to the ballpark, that every fan who wants his team to win, they have a reason for that team to want to win every day.
Yeah, I mean, you go to some of these places, obviously, like Tampa Bay is an exception because they have a brilliant guy running the thing and they make do with what they have. But you go to places like Pittsburgh and Miami and in recent years, and there's no feeling like people are going there expecting to win, and there's just no buzz. There's no excitement. And you're talking about second month of the season.
Yeah, really, as good as Eric's done down in Tampa Bay, remember, they have not won yet.
Right.
And remember that their ability to be in competing at the highest level in a 10 or 15 year, it's a very small margin of years. So it's not like one of the franchises that really invests every year and they're in it, 7 out of 10 or 6 out of 10 years. It might be 3 or 4 out of 10, but the reality of it is that these cycles are driven by the sell-offs of commodities to get younger commodities. And that prevents you, while it may get you to the playoffs without having the depth of veterans, it's unlikely you're going to ever to win the prize. So we keep looking at these models, and the model should be that you're designed to go out and be a world champion. That's the goal of every franchise. And we want rules that promulgate that. We want rules that reward for that. And I think the idea that these may have been unintended consequences, because I remember that there was a very small minority of voice on our part saying this is going to be grossly injurious to the game. Right. And a lot of people just said, oh, it's just the draft. There's not a lot of success in the draft. Few major leaguers make it. These picks are not worth that kind of value. Yet I think the baseball people clearly understood they were, and it was basically the commissioner's office recommended a bad rule. And if they want to keep the cap on the draft, then they need to put competitive assurance provisions that indicate that this club and the clubs have a desire to win, and that winning will allow them the ability to gain draft picks rather than losing allows them to gain draft picks.
Eric, do you think the players understand, the current players understand that, and maybe the older ones understand it more, the ones that have been around? Maybe the younger guys are just happy to be in the majors, and it's also new. They don't really think about that stuff.
When you're young, you're just trying to sort it out. You're just trying to stay up in the big leagues as much as you can, and you don't really worry too much about that stuff in your first couple of years because you don't understand it. But the more you go through arbitration, you go through free agency. And you see times, like my first time through free agency, every team was offering me 1.5. And I had to stick it out and wait. And I finally got 7 for 2 years. But I knew my value was more than I was getting offered. but I had to go through it to really appreciate, like, damn, there's nothing here, that nobody's really fighting for me like I felt like they should be. And that was because teams they don't need veterans anymore. I mean, they'd rather pay a guy 500 grand or whatever the minimum is and let him throw 100 all over the place and try to sort it out at the big league level than a guy that, has a lot of experiences and knows how to win. And that's kind of what Scott's talking about. Is you get to the playoffs and you get deep in those playoffs, you need guys to ride, and guys that have that experience to help you through those pressure situations, guys that have done it before, like an Eric Hinsky type of guy that comes up big in the playoffs. Maybe he doesn't get you through the season and doesn't, hit all the right numbers for you. But when it comes down to crunch time, you need guys that know how to win. And I feel like that's completely undervalued in the game now. And if you're old, you're one bad year away from being completely out of the game. And guys that have experience can make your young guys so much better. And it's just not valued anymore.
Scott, Eric and I have talked about how the game is skewed so much younger every year after year. It seems like it gets a little younger, and yet the arbitration system hasn't changed. And a guy like Max Fried is not going to become a free agent until he's basically on the downside of his career, the way the game is now. I mean, he's going to be close to 30 when he hits free agency. And that's what they're trying to. It's hard to get changed, but it's hard to get it done in one negotiating period, I guess.
Well, the idea of any labor force of unique ability is to titrate it to where, how can I put a value on it that minimizes it? The war structure, when you look at it, to have a positive war, you have to be like in the top 80th percentile. Mm-hmm. So they set up these standards that really they have so many holes in it. And the evaluation of it is manipulative by design so that we can denigrate the rarity of talent that once you play in the major leagues, how exclusive you are and how gifted you are. And there is nothing in the WAR metric that measures experience, psychology, all the things that are so meaningful in a locker room, how veterans teach, what that championship mentality derives from. Mm-hmm. All those things are not in any way measured and put into value. And yet it is a monstrous part of winning. Any manager, coach, player will tell you that. But yet in evaluation of value for the goal of winning, so much of that is dismissed. And when you look at this, you can't force the system to do things that promote valuations other than suggest that winning needs to be put in a perspective of what the relative qualifications are of a player to promote winning. That is the value standard that should be applied, but it's not. The standard to be applied is, when I have a ready surplus of players, I will always take the player of lesser value rather than the player of service time experience, because of the fact that I'm going to have a reasoned evaluation based upon my metrics to say I can justify it.
Do you feel like that changed, Scott? Did you feel like earlier on in your career that was something that was valued and something you could sell, the experience aspect, and now it's harder to sell that to teams, especially, if you look online, it's something that nobody values anything you can't measure anymore. Do you feel like the immeasurables were easier to sell in the past?
Well, I've learned in my job as a lawyer and a former player that the analysis and the employment decision belongs to the team. That they're the employer. What you try to do is you try to advocate that if you as a player want to sustain yourself in your career, you're going to have to do certain things to allow you to gain the experience, which is going to accentuate your physical skills. So you have to be very durable. You have to be, have leadership qualities. You have to have a skill threshold. Otherwise, this business will bring you in and spit you out, as it does for the vast majority.
Yep.
I always tell families, particularly ones when they're making a decision of going to college or or signing out of high school, this is not a career. This is an opportunity.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the numbers. I know you're the best. Look, we're all great in high school. We're all great in college,
Yep.
But then you go to spring training and the reality hits,
Yep.
and the point of it is when you get there, you see the light of that probability. And the idea of it is that I hope everybody gets a chance in pro baseball, but they do it not with detriment. They do it where baseball, like it is in my life, has been a stepping stone, a wonderful stepping stone where you're so pleased that you got to learn the game from George Kissel, or you had people like Bob Kennedy in your life
Right.
that aided you in so many ways, and baseball really helped you in many aspects of life. But the majority of what's going on today is that men have major league quality and they have experience, and that experience is not part of the calibration. There is
Right.
nothing about psychology, there's nothing about character that is in an award evaluation. And back in the day, there was vastly more of that.
Mm-hmm.
There was more consideration for that. There was more put into the character of what goes into things. And that's because there was a closer proximity to how the teams were built with the on-field personnel versus the executive personnel. Now there's a vast separation.
One of those character guys you're talking about that was that a lot of his career and the jobs that he got was because of that was Terry Pendleton. And you just reminded me of when you said Kissel, because he can't talk for, if you ask him about his background and his upbringing and where he got what he did, he can't talk for 2 minutes without mentioning Kissel. Like everybody that went through the Cardinals organization learned the Cardinal way. I think a lot of fans don't realize, Scott, that you played, 4 years of minor league ball with the Cubs and the Cardinals?
Yeah, I had the good fortune of having great experiences with both them. Bob Kennedy was the farm director of the Cardinals and became the GM of the Cubs and traded for me. And fortunately, back then they didn't have arthroscopic surgery, and I had 3 knee operations. So as much as I love hitting and doing what we did, it was just really, really hard to stay on the field,
Like Bobby Cox.
And
knee injuries ended his career too. And you were a walk-on at University of Pacific? Is that and he ended up being top 10 in a bunch of career stats?
Yeah, I was very fortunate because I had back then academic scholarships you could give full rides for rather than athletic. And so in principle, you're an athletic walk-on, but they were able to certainly take great care of me during my time there.
People don't know your background. Your dad was a dairy farmer? Is it dairy farmer?
Yes, dairy farmer, yeah.
So you go to University of Pacific and you get I didn't realize that you had a degree in pharmacy, doctorate in pharmacy.
Yeah, I have a
and law.
Industrial pharmacology is my background, and I would go and play ball in the summers and then go to school late, and then it's about a 7-8 year course of education, and then I'd be in spring training, and guys like Hal Lanier and Jack Kroll, they would monitor my neuropharmacology on spring training. So it was a hilarious process to kind of go through the academic and athletic world at one time like that.
Wow.
But everybody was so cooperative and grateful to allow me to pursue both an academic and athletic career.
And you put both of those degrees to work in your first job, right? Before you were an agent?
Yeah, I went back to law school, and this is my point about Bob. Bob, I hit about 290 in the minor leagues, and Bob just says, try to get your knees back. And he kept giving me contracts and really knowing that the probability of me coming back was minimal. And you know, and again, it allowed me to pay for law school, and I owe a lot to how I was treated in baseball in my career. And then while I was in law school, my close friend and Mike Fishlin asked me to help him with his contracts,
Uh-huh.
and Bill Caudle and Keith Hernandez, you know, guys that I'd played with the Cardinal organization. I kind of did an arbitration for Bill, and
Ah.
it worked out pretty effectively for him, and they got my picture in Sports Illustrated, and all of a sudden I started getting phone calls. Then I decided to help guys in the draft, and so I kind of went from medical law and working in a skyscraper in Chicago to doing something I was really passionate about.
So you decided, you know, you can keep your foot in baseball doing this and still make a good living doing this and doing what you be around a game still.
Yeah, you found out that, you know, you're able to talk the game with your teammates, and they wanted to talk with you, and it was very different than the agents that were in the game that they had because they were not baseball people. They were outside the game, if you will, and again, your teachings from, you know, I can't tell you enough, is that, you know, you have Kenny Boyer, or you have Kissel, you have Hal Lanier, you had all of these tremendous mentors that gave you so much insight to the game, you know, particularly about what your shortcomings were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Were that, you know, and you learned about the players that had the tools and did the things, and you also knew what you did well, and so that allowed you to evaluate talent and allowed you to understand how important the psychology of players was, because I got to watch how these players were mentored, and how they grew and what they did, and so in our operation, I always wanted a dynamic where we have a training staff that monitor our players all year round and communicates with the team's players, because we also know the physical and mental aspect of players, and we want that to be at the forefront. And it's very costly, but it is an investment, I know, that really aids our players that we represent, and it keeps us closely involved with everything they do, all during the off season. And we have training sites in Florida and California. We have apps. We have a way to stay in touch and monitor the players at great length. And it really gives us an understanding of what players are doing day to day.
That's never been more important than, I guess, two of these last 3 years. First during the shutdown, and then this year where guys could not be at the team sites and rehabbing guys couldn't be at the team facilities. Your plus has been a godsend, I guess.
Yeah, we have, you know, players are getting BP. They're getting their bullpens in. We're recording everything they're doing so that when they do go back to the camp, we're going to give all that information to the teams, let them know exactly where they're at, so that they really have had a spring training head start before they actually, you know, when and if the CBA gets completed.
Scott, when you hear, well, first, how big is your staff, and is that going to be enough when we go through what we're about to go through? I don't think you've ever seen quite what we're about to go through, right? The 3 or 4 weeks, maybe 95, it was similar.
Well, yeah, we have 140 people on our staff, and we have, you know, multiple resources at each of our venues, and so we have really more than enough staff to do things. We go in sessions, and we have some players like to work out in the afternoon, some in the morning, and so we're able to certainly provide the spring training preparation for each individual athlete.
But as far as the contracts and arbitration and all this, is it going to be crazy for you with all the clients you've got?
We were very prepared when we were doing many of the contracts, because remember, we have 15 or so major free agents, and we've signed 4 or 5 of them already. And for those that didn't sign, we've already had a big part of the process that has evolved. So we're very up to speed as to what teams were interested and where they were. And when this process begins, we'll be able to jump back in and use all that information and data to really kind of be further along in each negotiation.
Eric, what's it like for players to when they go? Do you know players that Scott has represented, and he tends to take it out to the end, right up to spring training or whatever, and be patient? What's it like for a player when you make that decision to go with Scott? Do you know that's part of it?
Well, it's
you got
nerve-wracking. It's nerve-wracking, but you have to trust that whoever's representing you knows what they're doing. Just like that's what the players are feeling with this lockout. You don't have an apartment set up.
Yeah.
You don't know when you're starting. I mean, your whole routine's thrown off, but that's kind of the negotiation process in general. Even my first year going to arbitration, they didn't make a real offer till 5 minutes before the deadline. And it's easy to panic and think you're not going to get it done, but you have to trust who's representing you and just kind of hang tight and hope they know what they're doing. And, if you got a guy like Scott or who I had, you feel good about it. But if you don't, man, I mean, that's when the teams get you. And that's what they're doing right now. That's why they're not making offers. They're holding out, is because they want that panic. So it's kind of a game of chicken, but you have to trust who's representing you.
Scott, when you get a call from a guy like Correa right in the middle of this thing, are you able to just say, yeah, we'll take you on too? Or do you never go, no, I'm sorry, we're all booked right now?
Well,
you can always make room for a $300 million guy.
Yeah.
I've known Carlos since he's 15 years old, and we have a long history. And obviously in the shortstop market, we signed both Simeon and Seager,
right?
Fully aware of the shortstop market, the team's interests, what they're doing. And so we could really hit the ground running when the bell rings. And remember too, David, that the rarity of someone not having a contract in spring training beginning in our instance is a very, very low percentage. I mean, people like to talk about those instances when that does happen, but remember, like, you could take Strasburg and Rendon and Cole. They were the first players to sign. I could remember in many instances we've had we're always the first to sign. So the idea that players are in spring training and unsigned and things like that, it frankly doesn't happen often in this situation. Obviously, it's going to happen to a number of players because of the fact that we're trying to make sure that the information to the player is collected over time. And sometimes it takes for certain players to sign for markets to open up for other players. So that's a signing attrition that takes place. The key thing for us is that our players are having a spring training modality. I remember one time we had a situation with Kyle Loesch where he literally signed a week before the season, and a rare situation. He went out and pitched one spring training game, and then went out and had a great season and started. He was the fourth starter in the rotation, which illustrates the ability of us to create a spring training situation and allow for a player to be ready to go out and pitch in the big leagues.
Scott, just real quick, you got, I look at like the Astros, for instance, you had Altuve, you got Bregman, you got McCullers, you had Correa. I mean, you have him now, but he's obviously gone from there. Well, not gone from there, but he's a free agent. And then you look at a couple other teams. You got the Red Sox, you got Bogarts, Jackie Bradley, JD Martinez, James Paxton. Yankees, you got Cole, Gallo, Britton. Does it get to, and Rangers, you got Simeon and Seager, that glitzy middle infield. Does it ever get with guys? Does it ever get tricky when you've got multiple guys on the same team, big dollar guys, and there's only so much of the pie, and you're negotiating for? Does it ever get, do your players ever? Does it ever get uncomfortable at all?
The great thing about being a lawyer is that you always let teams tell you what they're going to do. Mm-hmm. They make the decisions. You don't ever look at it like you're going to make the decision. You don't go to teams and tell them who to sign. You don't make decisions that owners make and executives make. So the key thing is that you're in contact with them. You know what their priorities are. You know what they want to do. And the great thing about representing the best players at the same time, like you have Cole and Strasburg, two great pitchers on the market, same time. You know everybody who's interested in everybody. Uh-huh. And you can tell the players more because you have more information. And so consequently, the players are more relaxed because they're not in the dark about what's going on with someone who is of equal performance caliber.
You had going back. You had Maddox was the first guy to go over $50 million contract. You did that one with the Braves, and then you had, I think, the first over $100 million with Kevin Brown with the
Correct.
Dodgers, and the first $200 million with A-Rod. Can you tell the story, the A-Rod Brave story? Is that for public consumption that you've told that with Bobby and when you brought him?
How his contract evolved?
Yeah, when you brought him to Atlanta.
Well, I think the one thing we knew from Atlanta was that Bobby Cox understood who Alex Rodriguez was and what a great player he was and what he could mean to a team. He also understood who was in his organization at the time. It was a remarkable group of talent. And in that setting, it was really going to be a new financial setting for an evaluation of a player that proved that 10-year contract he received, he earned his surplus value on it was well over 100 million more than it turned out. So it was a great deal for the teams. The problem was that you have history, you have precedent, and whenever you're doing new markets and breaking new markets, there always is a concern. There always is an organization that will, and many organizations who won't. And I'm very happy to say that the first 50 or 100 or $200 million pitcher in Scherzer or Kevin Brown had the lowest ERA over 5 years in LA, and Maddox, who I don't know if there's a better employment relationship that you can have than the one that Maddox had with the Atlanta Braves. And he had record salaries both times. So you really understand that when organizations are committed, they usually understand the players well, and that they know, while it may be something that's never been done before, the fact of the matter is the talent and the economics of the industry at that time properly reward the commitment. And what I certainly like to do is go back and look in history when people talk to me about these contracts don't work out. Well, I have I have two for every one that you say doesn't. I have two that do. So the reality of it is that it's something that's been highly effective and impactful for organizations to sign these elite players.
You don't have any Braves clients and haven't for a while, but you did in the past, certainly with Maddox and Andrew Jones and several others. You have a good relationship with Alex, right? So there's nothing to stop you from getting guys here now, right?
Oh no, I mean
Anthopoulos.
Alex is very communicative. When he was in Toronto with LA, I used to see him all the time, and he has a strong affinity for data, and we have a lot of it. So we get along very well.
What have you thought about the job he's done here in the 4 years he's been here?
Well, when you're sitting there with a ring on your finger, I would say how to use the rules. You know what to do, and frankly, as I look at this team, it's going to be better in 2022 than it was in 2021. And so when you win, and then your team's going to be even better, I would say you've built a very extraordinary platform.
Yeah, you talked about their young pitching that they have and the guys with the year under their belts and everything. Obviously, the Freddie Freeman questions out there, but they were raking in dough in the second half last year. And with the battery, you talked about the battery being, I guess, example number one of the ancillary revenues that a team's raking in. But the Braves are certainly doing it. Would you expect to see their payroll rise some in these next year or two?
Well, the great thing about the Atlanta Braves, we know everything about their profit, and they have monstrous profits. They have, $300-400 million in the bank, and they make well over $100 million last year, and that's just through 3 quarters. And they're a successful franchise. Good for them. They've done a really great job of you want for franchises, and we obviously would expect that the players and the continuance of this momentum is something that really requires a combination of not only the young players they have, but the veteran players that they need to support the future of the team.
Scott, what do you when people talk about you and say, people that don't really understand the inner workings of the game and say that you're bad for the game or you're ruining the game, what are you able to just kind of shake that off, knowing that you're out for the players and you played the game yourself and what what your purpose is? Does that
You know,
not bother you?
my labor law professor told me long ago, he goes, look, if you're really good at what you do for your client, 95% of the things said about you are going to be negative. And you know what? Fans of major league teams, they want the best players. They want to have the most volume of the best players.
Yeah.
I don't fault them at all. And a guy that does what I do as a lawyer for baseball players and trying to aid them and do the best decisions for them. Unless I'm representing their son, I completely understand why they may not be someone that really has or really has little admiration for what I do, because it might be contrary to the interest of who they root for and the betterment of their team. So I hope every fan understands that everybody that works for me, and I've got guys that have worked here 20, 25 years, and myself, we get calls from other sports. We get calls from so many people to negotiate a lot of things, and all we do is baseball. We pride ourselves in staying in the game, doing our best to make sure that the game is better because the athletes are better and the athletes are committed and directed. There's contract from the fulfillment and what we do, because it's not only what we do before the contract, we're there after the contract with our resources. We have psychologists on our staff. We provide every aspect of a resource for a player to allow him to perform optimally. And for me, that's the commitment to the game, where you're sitting there and making sure you've done the best you can to get the highest optimal performance for an athlete. And if he does that, he's committed to his team, he's committed to his fan base, and he's committed to the league.
Well, and what do you, when you say a fan say, try to reduce this to billionaires versus millionaires fighting for all this money, they see that 500, 600,000 minimum salary, and they don't understand that most of these guys don't play that long. And when they get out of baseball, they don't have a whole lot, most of them, to go to after that and take those skills. And what can you say just about the players and their position in this, as opposed to the owners?
Well, I think the idea of it is, like I said, this is the number of players that make it to free agency is really less than 15%. Mm-hmm. And the number of players that really spend 3 years in the major leagues, when you look at all the players drafted, it's well less than 1%.
Yeah.
For those that he can even craft out and make $2 million, making the minimum salary for 3 years, it is a small percentage of players. And when you go to a big league game, I realize it's just taken for granted because the players are there. Mm-hmm. But for all of us who've been in the system and understand what it means to be a major league player and how hard it is, and how so many of us, through attrition of some sort, don't ever reach that plateau, you always have the highest order of respect. And certainly I've got minor league plans. I've got minor league plans, and I want minor league owners who are making millions of dollars. I want them to enforce standardization of housing. I want them to provide food for those young men when they're in their cities, because no one knows their cities better than them. And we can create standards, but I got to have somebody to enforce them. And then I have somebody from the team go there and enforce them. And so we have to incorporate minor league ownership. They don't pay the players' salaries. They get free labor, but they should be giving them great food and great housing while they're in their cities. And so these are things that need to be done. We also have to have an incentivized program to where when you play over 3 years in the minor leagues, you get a $50,000 bonus, not paid by the team, but paid by a contributory pool that we put player fines and penalties in over time. If you actually do make it to the major leagues, then, and you didn't get a bonus that exceeded, a couple $1 million, you would then be able to get an extra $500,000 for making it to the big leagues, so that these men who've contributed their lives, and they're going to have very short major league careers, they're getting a benefit from their minor league service, which, as we all know, is very important to the preparation of the great major leaguers that we enjoy.
Yeah, until that all came out last year, I don't think anybody understood how little minor leaguers make, and the way that they live, sleeping on top of each other in one room apartments and all that. I don't think people had a clue how little they made.
Well, I think it's worse today than it was when I played. I mean, we made $450, $500 a month, but the money went farther than the $1,100 or $1,200 a month they're getting now.
Yeah. Last thing, Scott, I just wanted to ask you about Bobby Cox, because you talked about him. I know during the World Series when I saw you, you mentioned Bobby Cox, and you said one of the greatest talent evaluators you've ever been around. What do you think made Bobby Cox so special as a baseball man?
I tell people when they ask me about executives over time, people who had the skill to evaluate talent, had the skill to manage talent, and also had the skill to be a general manager. Bobby Cox is one of the few people that I've ever seen that had all three of those qualities, because I dealt with him at all three levels.
Mm-hmm.
And he was extraordinary at getting the best out of players, making an average player a better player. He was earnest, straightforward, as a manager, truly had a gift for doing it. And then as an evaluator, he came in and he had an eye for it. You know, I remember when he first saw Steve Avery and he called me on the phone and he knew right away who Steve Avery was.
Uh-huh.
And he knew how special he was and used that pick to get him. And so it's something where, you know, he is really someone who is, in my mind, the foundation of the great 90s of the Atlanta Braves. And they were certainly fortunate to have his skill set to guide them in so many ways and make so many judgments about both free agents, draft, and also the mentorship of the players and developing them in the big leagues.
We're gonna get 162 in.
Well, the thing of it is that I don't think anybody in this game understands, because now we have investments that are around the ballpark as well as in the ballpark. We have an evaluation of the performance of players that creates the highest revenue streams in Major League history. So good business says that should definitely happen for everybody, no doubt.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, listen, Scott, I really appreciate all the time you've given us, man. It's been enlightening, and I'm sure a lot of fans are going to appreciate seeing a side of you maybe they don't know about.
Well, thank you, David.
So thank you. All right,
Eric, it was great talking with you as well.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, Scott.
Okay, take care, guys.
All right, see you.
Bye-bye.
Well, that was cool.
That was some good shit.
That's it, everybody. I hope you guys enjoyed that. I mean, I've known Scott, you know, for 20 since I started doing this. Really, I met him probably third or fourth year at winter meetings, and I always, you know, he says some things that I know people that don't know him think, "Oh my God, this guy's a snake oil salesman," or "This guy's the worst." He's not that at all. You know, he's a good dude. He really is,
Yeah.
and he's just doing his job for his clients to the utmost degree. But he's not a detriment to baseball by any stretch of the imagination. The game's, I think, better for him. You know,
well, I mean, he broke it down perfectly that if you want your team to get the best players, you're probably not going to like him because he's going to make you pay what they're worth. But I really like the stuff he said about the minor leaguers.
Exactly, man.
That was pretty cool.
That's critical. It's critical that there's progress being made finally in that area, but it's not nearly enough. But yeah, I mean, it's like, you know, whether the players are getting this money or the owners are getting this money, the money's going to be raking in. The prices are not coming down. So it's like, do you guys want the best players in the game to be getting this money, or do you want this money to be going to the owners?
Right.
You know? Yeah. I mean, it's like he's right. The people buy these franchises and they sell them for like 10 times as much 10 years later. Or 5 times as much or whatever. But the point is it's foolproof. It's like an NFL franchise. It's bulletproof. You buy it, you're going to make a huge profit when you sell it. They take no risk.
Yeah. I mean, even if you could just buy a quarter of a percent, you'd do it. Yeah, I was thinking that when I heard that stock market comment, I was like, I'd like to invest.
Oh my God, a spit take.
I want to park my money with whoever's getting that return for their guys.
I'm like, are you kidding me, Kamish? Really? You think people buy that shit? I mean, that is just utter bullshit. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, you can buy the Pittsburgh Pirates and draw 10,000 a game and lose, lose 100 games a year, and you still make money. Yeah. A lot of money.
A lot. Yeah, so, I think it's similar to what I was saying with the free agency and arbitration process is, in negotiations, the longer you can hold out and put pressure and some of the media leaks, all this stuff is just to see how strong the players are. But I think they've been preparing for this, and they've had plenty of time to talk about it. The last 2 spring trainings, I'm sure you have a meeting with Tony Clark and all the big wigs in the Players Association, all the people that are up top. You talk to them, right?
Yeah.
And they break down the state of the game, where we're at with negotiations. I'm sure they've been telling players like, hey, don't go out and buy a Maserati or something this offseason because you might not be getting paid until May or June.
Right.
You guys need to mentally be prepared for this. And I think they are, and I think another big benefit's been players have a platform now. You can leak what you want to the media. If you go on to Twitter, there's 35 guys responding to that with fair points.
Yeah.
And a lot of the players are well-spoken and know how to get that message across and not just sound like greedy millionaires or whatever you want to call them. But it's also
unfiltered,
it's about those guys making the league minimum 2 times. And I think people need to understand if you're in the major leagues making league minimum, you got 2 years to make it. Maybe you made 1.2, but you clear 600.
Yeah.
And after that, you go out in the real world and look for a job, you're making 50 grand. So people see you out in the real world after that, and they're wondering why you're working at some regular job making 40 grand a year with them, and you're supposed to be a millionaire because you played in the major leagues and you got a family and a mortgage and
you got a big nut too, because you bought a nice house while you were doing that and a couple of cars. You probably wife had a couple of kids because that's what they do when they're back. The wife's back making the babies while you're working, and all of a sudden income's not coming in, but it's still going out.
And it's a really harsh reality and a steep drop, for a lot of guys in quality of life and everything going out in the real world. And, you look at it and, you're really blessed to have gotten to do what you do. But for the most part, most guys that you see, oh yeah, he played in the majors. Oh yeah, that guy played in the majors. They got a cup of coffee and they got a little chunk of change in their pocket. But that's what this fight's about just as much as, Correa's going to get his money.
Right.
The guys, A-Rods are going to get their money. It's for the guys that play 2 to 3 years and dedicated 10, 15 years of playing their ass off and working out every day and working kind of a full-time job and got, whatever, 20, 30 grand a year in the minors, that they get 1 or 2 shots to really make some money, whether it's arbitration. How many guys flame out after their second year ARB, first year ARB? They get 1 big chunk. And granted, that's a shit ton of money and nothing most people can dream about to ever have $1 million year. But those are the guys they're fighting for them to have this big accomplishment and have something to show for it when they're done.
Yeah. Yeah. He's, I like talking to him, man. I mean, whether, you hate to see him represent your guy if your team's not going to pony up and keep your guy.
Well, if you're the Marlins or Tampa or somebody and you got this Evan Longoria type of talent coming through or whoever, the hottest guy is, your team's not going to get to keep him.
And if he's representing Ronald Acuna, he's not signing that 8-year
contract.
That ain't happening, man.
Yeah. See, so I mean, I understand and he was understanding too. I thought it was pretty good the way he put it, but that's not his job, and you can't hate somebody for being great at their job.
Yeah. Sharp dude, man.
Yeah.
Son of a dairy farmer, went to University Pacific, gets his law degree and his doctorate in pharmacy, and was representing his first job. He didn't talk about his first job for a couple of years. He was representing pharmacy companies. He was an attorney for them in lawsuits and everything. So, and then I was curious how he got into representing players. I didn't realize it was because the guys he did some arbitration for guys, his former teammates. That's really interesting, man.
Yeah, the baseball angle was cool. Knowing I never knew he played. I just thought of him as an agent. So hearing that was like, it makes sense, because if you come out of the game or you're just still able to relate to guys and understand them and value them and tell them what they're good at in a way that nobody outside the game can, no matter how many conversations you have with them. It's just different going through it and understanding it's a harsh wake up call for guys that they're an all-star 1 year, 2 years later, they're at home and their wife's going to work and they're watching the kids because they don't have a college degree.
Yeah.
Understanding how, when he said the game will chew you up and spit you out, that happens to 99% of us. And then you got your Freddies and Chipper Jones and guys that get to go out on their own way. But most of us you're flash in the pan, you get chewed up, spit out, and the game doesn't care about you anymore. You're gone.
Yeah, man, he played 4 years, and that was a couple of good organizations to play minor league ball
Yeah.
in, the Cubs and especially the Cardinals, man. Everybody that plays in the Cardinals organization comes out saying when Kissel was there and still active and everything, especially, playing the Cardinal way, they just learned so much about the game. Terry Pendleton just praised that guy all the time.
You learn a lot
So,
about life from those guys too.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
a lot of life lessons.
Those guys that are around for like Snicker,
Yeah.
guys that are around organization, guys that are in the minor leagues for decades. You can learn a whole lot being around those guys, man.
Yeah, that's why Snit's a great manager,
Yeah.
because he went through the minors and failed, and he's had his however many times he's been fired in the game. He knows how harsh the game is, and not losing that, he can relate to the players so well.
Yeah. But I think that's why we've talked about this, why I think a lot of the marginal players, guys that never made the major leagues, are the best managers because they know how hard it is to be good.
They know that pain.
And they respect those players, and they don't,
Yep.
they treat them with respect, because
Yeah.
they know how hard it is to do what they're doing.
Yep.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, that was good. I don't know. I don't know what we got on as far as when we can expect this thing to get going, but
It's going to be a game of chicken, I think. I think though now that he put it pretty well when he said that there's all the extra revenue streams out there. Teams don't want to lose out on. When we were talking about attendance, it's also the Battery and Wrigleyville and all these places around the stadiums that they want popping for April and May.
Cardinals have got one of those now, and everybody's building them that doesn't have one. It's the way it's going now. He wouldn't talk much about the current because he said, and he told me that before, he wasn't going to talk about the current negotiations much because he's being portrayed as the boogeyman behind these negotiations because he represents like 5 of the 7 guys on the executive council, the players union. So he really is having a say in these negotiations, I think, as far as what he's telling his guys to say and all that. So
I'd want to lean on him. He's somebody that sees how it works and what the approach is from how they're trying to save and spend money and what you'd want to lean on agents for sure.
Right. But if he wanted to, he could have come out and told us exactly what's being said. You don't want to be so obvious.
That wouldn't be good.
And I did want him to say the story about Chipper and he didn't want to because he didn't mention it's a great story, but since he didn't want to name the names, but it involves Stan Kasten and some profane language. And it was quite funny, but I'm not going to say it out of respect for Scott not wanting to say it. So, but he tells it. Yeah, he tells it. It's very funny. Stan would laugh, I'm sure, because Stan gets a kick out of things he says. But it was a comment that Stan made to A-Rod. It was hilarious. All right, man. Well, we'll do this. We'll do this again next week. Players, the union and MLB is meeting on Saturday, day before the Super Bowl. We're taping this before that. This is coming out Monday morning, and hopefully there's going to be some progress made next week. Hopefully Saturday they make some, move towards progress in the following week. And I think once they start clicking off some boxes, it could happen quickly. Yeah. But right now there's still quite a bit of distance between them on these key issues. So I'm not anticipating it. And they still got a couple of weeks where if they get this thing done in a couple of weeks, they can still have spring training and start the season on time.
Yeah, they can have enough. I think once the ball gets rolling and real offers start coming to the table and both sides are ready to play, I think it can happen pretty quick.
It's the 11th. I'd say if they could get this thing done by like the 25th, somewhere around there.
A month's plenty, yeah.
And that gives you time, 5 or 6 days to get everything together, get to camp, and have a month of spring training and start the season on time. Plenty. So that's what I'd be looking at if I were them. I imagine they are. As that last week of this month, it's kind of the absolute deadline when you'll start missing some games in the regular season if they don't by then. Yeah. 4 weeks. I think they got to have 4 weeks spring training.
Yeah. 3.5, 4 would be ideal. Probably be the right timing anyway. It's too long in the first place.
Yeah, and everybody knows it, and I think that's why everybody's really not feeling it up against the wall yet, like fans are. Players know.
You can feel grounders at home.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll do this again next week. Thanks, everybody. We appreciate it. We'll do live next week too.
All right.
755 is real. Thanks again to Scott Boras. We're out.